Hey guys, it's Amanda. If you'd follow the channel, you'll know I love scary movies. But it's not just films. I love crime shows, documentaries, anything about serial killers I find fascinating. I don't know if I'm just a weirdo.
I don't know.
Do you like them? If you do, let me know any programs that you'd recommend because I'm looking for some new things to watch. And there are some terrible, horrible people on this earth. But today's video is looking at the top 10 most evil Brits.
Welcome to Watch Mojo UK, and today we'll be discussing the 10 most evil British people. For this video, we'll be discussing some of the most infamous examples of pure evil to be found on the British Isles. John Reginald Christie, 10 Rillington Place. This was the address of British serial killer John Reginald Christie. It was also the place where Christie committed some truly heinous crimes. The depths of Christie's evil not only has to do with 8 known victims, but also the fact that he initially led an innocent man to take the fall for his actions. Christie allowed Timothy Evans to be hanged for the murder of his own wife and daughter, a crime that was perpetuated at 10 Rillington Place. Furthermore, the deplorable details of Christie's methodology and behaviour during his crimes makes him one of Britain's most unique and uniquely evil people. Amelia Dyer. Who can kill a child? A monster, quite frankly, and this moniker certainly applies to one Amelia Dyer.
That poor man, punished for a crime he didn't even commit. I can't even imagine how many times that actually happens. People being wrongfully accused and then sent to prison, etc. That's awful. And also, I did hear his name before, but didn't really go into detail about who he was. Like, I wasn't expecting like a really detailed video going into like his whole entire life, but that didn't really tell me that much. So I feel like I'll need to do some research after this video as well.
Dyer was notorious during the days of Victorian London for her adoption and elimination of unwanted infants. It's unclear at which point Dyer's initially honest care of children went sour, but at some point, neglect turned into abuse and finally, murder. Dyer herself was eventually caught and hanged in 1896, but not before the crimes attributed to her began to climb up to an alarming number. Today, it's estimated that perhaps as many as 400 children lost their lives due to Amelia Dyer's wretched acts and
look at the
shocking
state of her,
behaviour. Peter Sutcliffe. Peter Sutcliffe was...
That many innocent children lost their lives. I don't need or want to hear anything else about her. I don't know if every crime is horrible. Of course, obviously it is. I just think that ones that involve children are the absolute worst. Oh, just horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
Dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper, a prolific British serial killer who terrorised areas of both Manchester and West Yorkshire during the mid to late 1970s. Sutcliffe targeted women and young girls, including, but not limited to, those working in the sex trade. A diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia alleged that Sutcliffe heard voices that led him to commit his crimes. These attacks were extremely violent in nature, and Sutcliffe's reputation grew as one of Britain's most well-known and feared serial offenders. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with 20 concurrent sentences, eventually dying in custody on November 13th, 2020. Oliver Cromwell. They say...
So, what's mental about Peter? And I'm sure that's true about many people in prison, but he spent more of his life behind bars than actually outside living. It's mental. And apparently he was dealing with like all these ongoing illnesses, like diabetes, and a few other things. And it was actually COVID that ended up sealing his fate. So I just found that quite interesting because I didn't realize it was 2020. Like I thought he passed years ago, but not the case.
that history is written by the victors, but that doesn't change the fact that Britain's former Lord Protector, Oliver Cromwell, is an extremely divisive historical figure. It's Cromwell's desire to acquire and retain power that remains one of this statesman's most defining characteristics. It also means many different things to many different people, with those who signal out Cromwell's wartime brutality as just one of the reasons to claim that this man was pure evil. The Irish campaign of 1649 was particularly bloody, with the sieges of Drogheda and Wexford attributing massacres and war crimes to Cromwell's troops. Hero to some, tyrant to others, Oliver Cromwell's legacy remains controversial to this day. Edric Striona.
I'm by no means saying that I know everything about history, because I obviously don't, but I was under the impression that he was like quite a great man, as he helped establish the British Army, and I think he also helped with the Navy, and he also wanted people to have like a greater freedom of religion, which I think he helped with that. But just goes to show there's two sides to everyone.
Fate best befalls a traitor. If you answered with execution, then perhaps the fatal end of one Edric Striona remains justified. This is due to the fact that Striona, once a chief counsellor to King Ethelred II, betrayed England to the invading Danish forces of King Canute in 1015. This wasn't the only moment of infamy in Edric's life, as he was also involved with the assassinations of noblemen while in service to the crown. By all accounts, this was a man forever looking out for his best interests, angles by which Edric would come out on top. His gamble with Denmark proved to be his undoing, however, as he was ultimately ordered executed by Canute sometime around the winter of 1017. Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket is a British historical figure similar to Cromwell, in that his reputation remains divisive. The former Archbishop of Canterbury is known as a Catholic saint in the modern day, but this doesn't change any of Becket's actions while he was alive. The man's fancy and extravagant lifestyle while serving under King Henry II brought with him accusations of embezzlement, although these were never authenticated. This relationship soon became adversarial, as Becket played the church against the state, dividing all of England in the process. Thomas Becket was assassinated by British knights, allegedly on the orders of King Henry, in June of 1170. So was Becket a power-hungry clergyman or a pious martyr? You be the judge. King John. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, is a quote often attributed to William Shakespeare and Henry IV. However, at what point do the pressures of rule make up for a leader's apparent reputation for cruelty? This is, in part, why the legacy of John, King of England, remains controversial. He's alleged to have taken the throne by subterfuge and murder, with the death of Arthur of Brittany, although this is unconfirmed. The wars fought under his reign were bloody and often unsuccessful, while citizens were also said to have been burdened with excessive taxation under King John. He was excommunicated by the Pope, and he broke the Magna Carta peace agreement not long after it was established. In other words, he was a great king. Oswald Mosley.
You know, I think it was just different times then. Like, yeah, some of them obviously were out for themselves, but I don't know. It just comes down to power and money and wanting control. And there wasn't really as many laws and regulations and stuff holding them back, really. Everyone could kind of do what they wanted to a certain extent. And no, it wasn't always ethical or morally right, was it? I'm surprised how many politicians or people involved in the government are on this list. I thought it was going to be something completely different. More like the woman with the children. It's completely dire. I thought it was going to be a list of like people like that, but it's not. As we're getting closer and closer to number one, there isn't as many of those at all. It's all politicians, which is mental. Like the most evil people.
Mosley. It's difficult to believe that the future fascist Oswald Mosley at one point was very close to becoming Britain's Prime Minister. Mosley challenged Neville Chamberlain in 1924, before eventually forming what would later become the British Union of Fascists as the New Party in 1930. His economic policies arrived armed with heavy anti-Semitic rhetoric, and his second wedding was attended by Nazi leaders Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels. Mosley was also associated with Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, particularly while visiting the country in the late 1930s.
So you kind of know what sort of man he was.
All of this and more contribute to Oswald Mosley's reputation as one of the most infamously key figures of far-right political activism within 20th century Britain. Hugh Despenser the Younger.
Well, that's
It
quite the
seemed
name.
as if no land was enough for Hugh Despenser the Younger. This British nobleman seized property by any means necessary, accumulating Welsh lands with zeal and fury. However, the court barons of King Edward II soon became wary of Despenser's influence with the king and sought to kill him. Edward and the Despenser family soon became exiles, after a successful invasion was plotted by Edward's wife, Queen Isabella. Edward III ascended the throne, Hugh Despenser was put on trial, and the latter was violently executed as a traitor in 1326.
Oh, that looks awful.
Jack the Ripper. Although the identity of the man behind the Whitechapel murders remains a mystery, Jack the Ripper's reputation as Britain's most evil man remains secure. The calling cards of Jack's Victorian-era crimes were many, with some investigators and historians claiming that the Ripper must have possessed some form of surgical knowledge. Meanwhile, the taunting letters sent to the police paint a picture of a deranged yet callously coordinated killer, one who was perversely proud of his work. The brutality of the crimes and the evidence found at the Ripper's crime scenes continue to fascinate true crime scholars to this day, while Jack's eternal evil continues to haunt our British history.
I've actually been on a tour in London that takes you around where his crimes were committed, and it was like stepping back in time. It was a really cool experience, but also quite eerie in the fact that he was never caught. All the chaos and the fear that he put in people, them being afraid to walk down the street, we got away with it. Obviously, it was different times and there wasn't all the technology that we have today to catch criminals and things like that. But I just think it's madness. But I found that video really interesting. I hadn't heard about most of them. Well, a few of them. And, oh, of course, the Rippers, everyone has heard of them and their horrific stories. But I'm going to look a few of them up as they really didn't go into great detail about who they were. I mean, to make the top 10 evil person list, you have to be pretty horrible. I mean, I wouldn't want to be on that list. But what do you think? Do you have anything that you'd like to add? Do you think they're the top 10 most evil Brits to ever walk the earth? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Smash that like button if that's what you're into. And I'll see you in the next video.